Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this video I'm going to be painting up the new Maw Grunta from the recent Ironjawz release that Games Workshop sent us through for review. Now, this is very much a companion video to the one I did last week where I painted up the Bard Boy's Big Boss, I think he's called, the little foot character, doing the yellow scheme for the Iron Suns. And there's certain things that I covered in that video that I'm not going to cover in this video because it's exactly the same thing. Just try and keep the time down a little bit. So things like the skin, you want to check that out. We actually used the model from the Maw Grunta to do the demo on if you haven't seen it. So that's in the other video. And this video is more about painting the pig, but also how I would paint up the scheme for the Blood Toofs. And the reason I chose that is because in the background, the Blood Toofs were the first sort of Ironjawz tribe. I can't remember the character's name, but basically the first ones to quote unquote tame one of these Maw Gruntas and then go charging around the mortal realms in them, jumping through realm gates and all the rest. So I thought it'd look cool to do it in red, but also because I just wanted to have some fun and paint a great big pig. So let's paint. Starting off, the whole model, including the rider, was getting a base coat of hull red. Now this is it's a military modelling colour. It's one I came across when I first got back in the hobby, and it looks a lot more red when it's wet and going on. It dries much more of a brown, but it's just a really lovely base coat, and it suits, I think, the green of the skin, but also it's going to help us out with the brown on the boar, or the Maw Grunta, and also the red scheme that we're going to do on the panel. So there's no harm in having that sort of one colour fits all base coat. It's very thick paint, so I needed to thin this about 3 to 4 drops of thinner for every 1 drop of paint, spraying at 25 psi, 0.4mm needle and nozzle, Harder and Steenbeck coat of paint Infinity. Just nice solid base coat all over. And then the only real stage I'm going to use the airbrush on now is for getting the first steps of the skin done on the pig. Now I really ummed and ahed about what colour to do the pig in, and in the end I thought I'm going to keep the pig pretty boring so that the red is what catches your eye, and hopefully the rider is what catches your eye. I'm always striving to try and get more impact on the table from my miniatures. It's definitely something I struggle with. I paint things that I think look good under the painting lamp, not for display standard or anything like that, often for playing games with, but they look great under the lamp and then they just look a bit naff on the table. And one of the ways I'm trying to introduce that is to provide greater levels of contrast across the model, not just colour contrast, but things like contrast of value, so light and dark. And the airbrush is going to allow me to very quickly establish some areas of light and dark with the skin. So I've loaded up Night Questor, which is a Citadel paint. I've thinned this probably 3 drops of thinner to paint, still doing the same pressure, all the rest of it, same airbrush. And I'm spraying this more or less top down, so that I'm only going to hit the areas that are facing upwards towards the light, leaving the areas facing away from it much, much darker. They're going to be that whole red. And if this was a smaller model, you could absolutely do it with the airbrush. You could just do it with a brush to get yourself started. It doesn't matter which tool you use, but if you have access to it, this is one of those areas where the airbrush just comes into its own and can really speed up a job. But I also actually think it can make the job look a bit nicer, just because it offers me a chance to very, very smoothly highlight some larger areas and very easily do it. But we're going to combine some airbrush and some brushwork here. And the reason I've left this footage in sort of real time is to give you an idea of how long it took to paint the head with the airbrush, keeping the layers really, really thin, so that because the paint is thinned, you know, I've probably applied 4 to 5 layers in total there to get that colour. But what that's done is each time it's just increased that lovely blend from the darker into the lighter colours. And then for the nose, I was like, I really like painting the extremities on monsters a different colour to their main skin colour. And I thought, I'll do his nose black, that'll be really cool. And then I looked at the box art and that's what they've done. So obviously it wasn't that clever, was it? But it's, you know, this is just thinned down black paint just to give it a slight point of difference, I thought anyway. The only thing to be aware of when we're spraying really, really thin paint like we are here, and we're talking like, you know, this is proper see-through wash consistency paint, is just don't spray too much in one area. It will build up very quickly and run across the model. So now I'm going to go in with my hairy brush, and I'm using Night Questor again here. Haven't mixed it with anything yet. And you can see on my nail, or actually you can't really see on my nail, but I'll do it on the base in a second. You can see we're using thin paint, so it's on my palette. I've mixed it with some water. I've loaded my brush up. I've touched my brush off on some kitchen paper so that it's not, you know, saturated with paint. And now I'm going to go in and just start doing lots of little dashes and dots all over the place on those areas that are facing right up towards the light. So even if you look at them and you think, oh, that's in a crease, if that crease is facing the light, it's perpendicular to the light, it's going to be light. So not all the recesses will be dark. It depends on where your light's going to come from. Now, I really haven't paid much attention to a particular directional light source on this model. That wasn't the focus for this sort of paint job, this exercise. It's just top down, really. And again, by keeping the paint thin, we can apply it in multiple layers and just build up this lovely texture on the model. And I don't mean physical texture, I mean lots of little scratches to make the pig's skin look really worn and just gnarly, really. And now what I'm going to start doing is mixing in ice yellow to that night Questor. Now, Dawn yellow, something like that from Games Workshop, very, very similar colour. It's just a yellow. It was the one I used in the last video. It was on my desk. I've used it to highlight most of the stuff. It works perfectly well. But, you know, if you want to use a slightly different colour to lighten it, go for it. It's not going to make a massive amount of difference for this sort of paint job that we're doing. Now, if you would like to see much longer format videos, perhaps where we spend best part of an hour just painting the skin on something, and often to a much higher level, then consider checking out our Patreon. I just wanted to say a massive thank you to those of you that support us over there. It's allowing me and Andy and I to just produce videos here each week, videos over there each week, pick really cool projects and just enjoy ourselves doing it and try to bring them to you in a way that can help you maybe enjoy your painting more, and maybe sort of find a few little tips and tricks along the way as well. But we really, really do appreciate it. And here I'm just adding in more of that ice yellow and doing little scratchy scratches. Now, once I was happy with all the brushwork there, I just wanted to smooth it out a little bit. And because it's such a large model, I was able to use my airbrush to do this slightly more quickly. If this was a small model, I would have done this with brushwork, where I would have just done some glazes using the Night Questor ice yellow mix. But effectively, I'm going to glaze it using the airbrush here. So very, very heavily diluted. You know, we're talking 5-6 drops of thinner to paint. And just giving it a little layer of that just to smooth things out a little, blend them together a little more. But you can still see all that lovely scratchy work that we've done underneath. It's just brought a bit of life to that skin. Now for the gums, I wanted to pick a few focal areas really on this model. The rider for me was key. The red armour panels were key, and his face on the pig I just think is 99% brilliant. I can't stand the drool that they've sculpted on. I really hate it. Did not enjoy painting it. Wish it wasn't on there. But everything else about the face I think is amazing. So I wanted to sort of help draw that eye. And by having the rest of it all quite boring, you know, that skin colour's pretty boring. The brown fur is going to be pretty boring. A nice sort of poppy pinky red on the gums would just help draw the eye towards there. And all we've done is used Vorbak and then mixed in a little Wazdakka Red. The reason I did this is when I mixed in the ice yellow to lighten it, it just lost the sort of saturation. It wasn't red enough anymore. So by adding Wazdakka in, it sort of kept that nice pinky red colour. Now for the eyes, I really struggled here. I love doing eyes just glossy black on beasts. I think it suits them really well. I think it makes them really gnarly. And you can see here as that paint's still wet and we're getting the reflection of the light on it. I love how it looks, but it doesn't photograph terribly well. And I wasn't sure if I was maybe being a little bit lazy doing it on here as well. I don't want to be lazy. This whole model has been really, really fun to paint. So I thought, okay, if it's a focal area, put a bit more work into it. What can you do? I thought, well, a beady little yellow eye will look pretty cool as well. So I've base coated it using English Uniform, and then I'm going to highlight the yellow using Agrax Hide. Both of them are just sort of nasty yellow colours. English Uniform's got better coverage than Agrax Hide, which is why I use that But, you could mix in a bit of, I don't know, Mournfang or something with your Hobgrot Hide, give it slightly better coverage or whatever. And I'm just painting in the entire eye. I painted it black first because I wanted to make sure that I had a nice bit of separation there between the eyeball and the eyelids, and I wouldn't have to go in and wash it to create that. And then we're going to paint in the pupil. And the biggest tip really I can give you here is start really small with it. Put it where you think it should be on the eye. And if you're slightly too far to the right or the left, for your taste, wherever you want to have him looking, then you can adjust it easily. If you go in straight away and try and do a great big blob and it's wrong, you're just going to have to start all over again, and painting the yellow over the black is just a bit laborious. It was at this point when I was painting the miniature that I wish I'd left the armour panels on that are on its shoulders. They're one piece and they just pop straight on. But I really enjoyed building the model and just glued them on. But absolutely, for sub-assemblies for your own models, I'd recommend you leave them off, just because you're going to be touching them all the time to steady your hand. And then a little white dot in the upper corner towards the back of him, towards the rear of the model, just gives it a little reflection. And I actually think that was well worth the effort. It's only 3 paints or whatever, but I think it was worth it. Incidentally, with regards to the leaving the panels off, you're going to be touching this model quite a lot as you paint it. I loved painting this model, just to caveat that. I adored it. I thought it was really, really good fun. I would do it again in a heartbeat, but it wasn't easy to paint just because of the size of it and touching it, essentially. So I constantly was rubbing the armour panels and the tusks, so you're going to want to leave those till near the end. Now for the fur, as I've said already, want to keep it boring. So I've just gone over the whole red with some Rhinox Hide. Over most of it, I'm not worrying if I've left a bit. If I've missed a bit, it doesn't matter. It's just going to be that nice whole red brown colour. And then I've mixed in a little ice yellow into the Rhinox Hide, and I'm going to do a few different bits of the fur with the grey, that sort of grey brown we created. And then I've mixed in a bit of black into the Rhinox Hide, and I'm going to do a little bit of the fur, particularly the fur towards the bottom of him, or the extremities of him. So you can see here on his hackles. Anyway, the bit at the back of him here. I'm going to paint a few more of those black as well. I really like it when you look at furs, particularly like sheepskins and things like that. It's not one uniform colour. It's lots of different colours in there very often. And I just think it makes it a little bit more interesting. And because I wasn't worrying overly about a light source, this whole model's a bit of a hodgepodge really of styles. It's just me colouring in, having fun. And actually, we'll talk about that a bit later, but I think that was very worthwhile. It just worked nicely, and having that hodgepodge of colours on there was just, I think, gave it a slightly more natural vibe, even if the style wasn't naturalistic. And then I did a bit of Mournfang as well, the odd one here and there, a bit more sort of gingery fur on him. Now for the leather, and there's quite a bit of it actually on this model, the way that the armour's held on and the harness, or whatever you call it, around his head. So I painted that in black first of all. I've used AK black here, but use whatever black you like. And then I've mixed into that some Gobi Brown, which is a paint by scale 75, but it's really just a very light brown colour, and I love the look of it on black leather. I've got an old pair of black boots, and they're a great reference point. And when they're so old and so worn, it all sort of goes that light brown colour. I just think it's really effective, and it contrasted nicely against all of the brown, the fur. It contrasted nicely against the skin. It really helped frame that face that I'd enjoyed painting so much. So again, thinking about where do I want people to glance at the model when it's on the table, or they pick it up or whatever. And little things like that can help you just sort of force people to look where you want them to. And all I've done is mix them together, and then just lots more scratches. Really, that's the way I painted nearly the entire model. It's just lots of little dabs and scratches to create the ideas of texture. And we just keep adding in, and then eventually go up to the pure Gobi Brown, which we're doing here. And you can see it on those straps that's on his middle. I'm focusing particularly here on areas of high wear and tear. So if there was some buckles, or let's say they were the reins up near the rider's hands or whatever, more wear and tear, I'd have more of this pure Gobi on there. And this model's big, there's no getting away from it, but there's not actually that much to paint on, or that much different stuff to paint on him. Now I've been in here and done all of the leather. I've done the teeth on him, which we'll cover later, and I've done the black armour, which I covered in the previous video for the Iron Sun scheme. Here I am pointing at the draw, saying how much I hate it. All I've done there is left it whatever colour it was from me painting the rest of it, added a bit of white in, put a few dots on there, and I'm going to gloss varnish it later. I just, to paint realistic, yeah, it's just too much work, I think, to paint it to look great. And this is army painting. I'm not going to spend that time on this model doing that. And yeah, it just really pissed me off, to be honest. That draw, but got over it. Bit of gloss on there, it'll be absolutely fine. And at this point I decided to get some of the metal painted because we're getting towards the outer parts of the model now. So any of the metal that was left inside just got a coat of Pro Acryl Dark Silver. It's just a dark metal colour. Now for the actual red panels themselves, this is the most fun bit for me. I have stippled over Mourning Brown over that whole red base coat that we had. I'm using a stubby brush here, quite a large stubby brush. It will get absolutely ruined doing this, or what it will actually become is a great stippling brush for doing this with. And the first time round, we're just kind of getting it all over, leaving a little bit in the recesses. Second time round with the Mourning Brown, I'm doing a few more sort of scratchy directional brush strokes here, rather than just dabbing it on. And again, we're keeping the paint really, really thin, so that we can build it up in layers without actually putting physical texture onto the model. And now I've started to mix in ice yellow to that Mourning, and you see here I'm doing much more directional brush strokes. And all of this is to represent sort of just how battered the armour panels are, how they'll have been painted and repainted and battered and repainted and so on and so forth, and just creating just lovely textures and interesting things to look at on the model. It's a very relaxing way of working. Have a pair of tweezers handy, because it just annihilates your brushes and you're going to lose hairs on the model. So yeah, a little pair of tweezers is quite handy. And I'm placing this lighter colour thinking about that light from above. So if there are some surfaces on the armour panels that are facing away from the light, so say lower down that panel, you can see you've got that direction change. I won't put this lighter colour in there now. It's had a little bit of the Mourning for the odd scratch, but it doesn't need this lighter colour. And then we continue mixing in the ice yellow. And I've switched here to a dry brush because it's got more coarse bristles, so they don't flex as much, which enables me to get these much more accurate sort of scratches that you can see I'm creating. Key here is to not let the paint get dry, otherwise it ends up getting that sort of dry brush look to it, which I didn't want. So although I'm using a dry brush here, I'm still very much painting it with it rather than dry brushing with it. And there you can see all around the model it's done, and it took a while, maybe, I don't know, it's certainly less than half an hour to get all of that work done and the red applied. Because the paint is thin, we're not applying it in thick coats, it dries very quickly. By the time you finish the last panel and you're back to the first, it's good to go again. And then for the red, I've chosen one of the newer contrast paints. This is called Baal Red. They're very, very powerful, so I've thinned it a lot with water and just given the model 2 coats of it. And you can see you're able to see through those layers of red to all that texture that we applied underneath. And then where it's gone over that highlight from underneath, it has got a little pink on the highlights. Now I love red highlighted with pink, I think it looks fantastic, but it wasn't the look I wanted for this particular model. I do love that classic orc red with the sort of orangey highlights, and because realism was of very little concern when painting this, I decided to go with that. So I've gone for Fire Dragon Bright, which is a Citadel colour. It's just a nice light orange colour, and here you can see me sort of just tippy tapping along the edges just to create some chips and some highlights, but also just to replace the pink effectively with the orange. And there's a lot of these ridges on the armour panels, and all you got to do is just move the model around a lot, like you can see me doing here. And it's very simple to pick them up with the edge of the brush rather than trying to pick them up with the tip of the brush. And then one of the really cool things I think with the Blood Toofs scheme is the yellow flames that they put on the red thing. Now, it's very easy, I think, to create McDonald's orcs if you're not careful with the red and the yellow. But I think a little judicious placement of the odd yellow panel or the odd yellow flame, I think, can look really cool. So I'm just building up might as well call it a pre-shade, whatever you want to call it, what we did before. So Mournfang, adding ice yellow, on and on and on. And again, I'm doing it tapping and scratching. So rather than the flames being all neat and lovely over the top of this beaten up red, we need to make them fit in. It's so relaxing doing this because you can't really go wrong. I've genuinely, I can't remember the last time, other than the time constraints of having to get it done for a video, and that was a shame because I did run out of time on the model. I would have liked to have spent a bit more time on it. Other than that, it was a joy to paint. Just very, very relaxing. I mentioned it in the last video. It's properly changed the way I'm going to consider painting things for myself. And then once you're happy with it, we'll just go over with another one of the newer contrast paints. This is Imperial Fist. Again, very strong. Water it down, not too much on your brush. Then give it a couple of coats. Don't worry, I'm sure we'll have some of the video in focus in a bit. It's a big old model, this. On the bits of the silver metal, I've just mixed together Agrax Earthshade, which is a brown wash, and I've mixed that with Gryph-hound Orange, which is an orange contrast paint. It's a wash, just to create sort of orangey brown wash colour, just to discolour it and make it look a little bit rusty. We're going to do some oil work and stuff on the metals anyway, but this is just a nice starting point, I think. And again, the red panels for me, the focus, so keep the metal nice and simple. Now I've given the model here a very thin dusting coat of a satin varnish. I didn't really want to varnish it because I really liked the finish I had on most of the model, but the fur, I didn't like the finish I had on the fur. So I thought, okay, I'll unify it with satin, and rather than using out the bottle satin, I mixed my own up, and it was 10 drops of matte varnish to 1 drop of gloss varnish, and then thinned that, probably 3 or 4 drops of thinner to varnish. So very, very thin coat of the varnish, just took the edge off the shine that was on the fur. And now I'm going to go in and do a couple of little oil washes on the model. So I've taken sepia oil here, and I'm mixing it up with normal mineral spirits because I want them to dry quickly. And I'm just going to pin wash that over the metals, but I'm also going to wash that over any areas of the model where I want to bring a little bit more definition in. And hold on a second, there we are. We're only 20-something minutes in and got a nice focused bit of footage there. And the reason I chose sepia is because it's a dark brown, so it will provide me with that level of contrast that I want. So I'm just getting all of the little nails and bolts and things. And then I've taken an orange oil paint. This one's called Light Rust by Absalom 502, but you could use something like Burnt Sienna, would work very well if you've gone to the art shops to get your oils. I'm just going to do a bit of this here and there. It's obviously not going to show up a huge amount on the red, so don't waste your time. But you've got some nice black armour panels on here, and it will show up amazingly on that. So a little bit here and there. And that's another tip, I guess, when we're army painting. Like you don't need to paint every single bit of the miniature to the nth degree to sell an effect. And I'm just going to put 1 or 2 little streaks in here with oil. I'll put a link up in the corner for doing streaks using oil. So this wasn't the easiest model to hold and film. So there's a better video on that. I think I'm using a tank in that video, but the technique's exactly the same. And then lastly is the tusks, and the reason I've left these to the end is because, as I said, I kept touching them as I was painting the model. So I just figured leave them right to the end, and then you're done. I really ummed and ahed on what to do with the tusks, because although they are a really key is probably the wrong word, although they are an obvious bit of the model, right, that stands out, I didn't want them to dominate the face of the boar. I really liked what I'd done with the face, so I decided to keep the tusks really boring. So when I've done the teeth in him, all I did was US Olive Drab and then mix in Karak Stone. For the tusks, I've done the same. So I mixed in a bit of that Karak Stone here to the tips, and then I just mixed in a bit of black at the ends near his mouth. But that was all I wanted to do on them. I didn't want to overly render them. I didn't want to paint loads of the striations up them and stuff and draw more attention to them than I wanted. So again, is it realistic? No, it's absolutely not realistic. Is it consistent with other bits of the model? No, it isn't consistent with other bits of the model, but I suppose that's a bit of a theme of this whole miniature. As I mentioned earlier, it was just me having fun colouring it in different ways, and I actually think it's come together really nicely. I'm very, very happy with this model. Yes, I'd like to have spent a little bit more time on it, as I often would when I'm doing these videos, but we've got to get them done. However, when we're painting armies for competitions or going down the club or whatever, we often will run out of time, and I think almost having that self-imposed limit on it's been really helpful, because it made me knuckle down and think, what is the most important thing on here? And again, for me, that was things like all that lovely texture work on the skin for the orc, getting the face of the pig right, and then most importantly, getting those armour panels, I think, looking really interesting, where they, I hate the word pop, but where they look, where they do pop on the table, but then when you pick them up and look at them a bit closer, they're also quite rewarding and interesting to look at like that. So for me, this orc release, I know it's not necessarily been the most popular things we've done on the channel. It's a little bit more niche, but now and again, because of your guys' support, I can be a little bit more self-indulgent and just paint some minis that I really would love to paint. And if it wasn't for this channel and your guys' support, I probably wouldn't have done this miniature. And as it was, I think it's fundamentally changed the way I'm going to paint things. And the reason I say that is because when I paint stuff for my armies, I often paint within myself to get it done, on a time frame. And I can end up being a little dissatisfied with it, wishing I took it that bit further. And I had that problem with the Slaves to Darkness army that I started earlier this year, and it's been bugging me all year that I haven't managed to complete that and kick on with it. And I just wasn't able to give it the time I wanted to give it. However, looking at this orc model, I'm more than happy with that. I'd be really proud to go down the club and play some games with that and show that to my buddies. So maybe there's something in that, it's finding those models that painting to your army painting level is all they ever need to be. And I'd be really interested to know if you've had that experience at all and what models those might be. So pop that down in the comments. I'll look forward to reading them. So as ever, if you've got any questions about what I've done, pop them down in the comments. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks ever so much for your support. If you've enjoyed the video, hit the like button, hit subscribe if you're not, and I'll see you next time. If you've liked any of the models in this video and you fancy having an army of them yourself, but perhaps you don't have the time or wherewithal to get it done, consider dropping us an email at commissions@cultofpaint.com, and maybe Ben can sort you out.